Everybody, good afternoon, firstly, to everyone who's here. It's really wonderful to have everybody's smiling, happy names on my screen, seeing as no one can, and obviously Nina's smiling face there as well. My name's Lachlan Green. I'm the UQU Environment Officer for 2020. I'm your MC for today's festivities. If at any time there's everything stops working or something, you can just write in the chat. We can see that. Before we move on to anything else, though, I think it's very important that we invite Zane on, Zane Higgins, who's one of UQU's Group RIMPA officers. We'll get him on now to do a welcome to country. Thanks, Zane.
Thanks, Lockie. So my name's Zane. So I'd first like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and their continued connection to the land, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zane. I think the welcome to country is honestly one of the most important parts of any event that we hold in Australia, especially those events that relate to environmentalism and to sustainability. In any way, First Nations Australians have lived here in Mianjin, is where we're sitting, or all over Australia for over 60,000 years. They've lived at one with the land, with the sea as well. And all that time they've been stewards of the natural world, and we can only aspire to be like that. So from there, before we get into today's speakers, I'd just like to introduce the event to you, obviously. So welcome to the inaugural UQ Environment Forum. This is an event that's co-hosted by the UQ Environment Collective and the Green Ambassador Program, which is an initiative of the Sustainability Office. So the Green Ambassador Program is something new this year that a lot of people probably won't be too familiar with. It's a Sustainability Office initiative, as I said before, started off this year with the intention of allowing staff and students to communicate and coordinate student-led ideas. That's how this event came about. It's been driven by students with the assistance of staff from the Sustainability Office. The Green Ambassador Program aligns itself closely with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'll learn how to say that by the end of today's event. The SDGs, which I'm sure you will hear plenty about because they're a main focus. Other than that, we're directly concerned, the Green Ambassador Program is directly concerned with raising awareness about environmental issues related to UQ and beyond, and advocating for sustainability. The Green Ambassador Program is headed by the Environmental Council, which is made up of a variety of elected students and staff representatives. The other group on the screen there is the Environment Collective, who's the UQ Union's Environment branch or department. The Environment Collective is concerned with direct environmental action, ensuring a broad environmental awareness for UQ students and advocating the UQ community to form a healthy connection with the natural world. I wrote that blurb and I should know it because that's my direct concern. Every UQ student, by virtue of their enrolment, is a member of the collective, and it's headed up by the regularly handsome man on your screen right now. So today's structure. So I'm introducing part one here. So this is the Sustainability UQ webinar. We're going to start the afternoon with a series of talks about sustainability, environmental endeavours of our very own UQ researchers and staff. This will go pretty quickly. There's a lot going on, or even a heck of a lot going on. We want to make sure any of your questions are answered as we go, though. So down the bottom, we're going to make use of that Q&A button. At the end of each chat, I'll have a look at that Q&A section. Sorry, Megan. It might be my microphone. I'm sorry. What I was saying though, we're going to use the Q&A function that's inbuilt as part of the webinar format, and I'll have a look at that at the end of each of the talks, and then I'll pose some of those questions to the speakers. The other way they can be answered is in that Q&A function. Some of the speakers will go in there afterwards and will answer any of the questions that we don't get to, because we will be moving pretty fast. If you have any further questions for any of the speakers, you can reach out to the emails that they provide you, or you can reach out to the Green Ambassador Program, the Sustainability Office, or to myself, and we can pose those questions, get them in contact with you. The second part of today's event is what is going to make today really worthwhile. It's really what's inspired this whole event to take place in the first place. We'll be breaking off to discuss more personalised interest areas relating to sustainability and environmentalism. So if you have any ideas, comments, critiques of UQ's environmental strategy, this is your chance to voice them and have them heard. And we'll get more into the logistics of that in the second hour of today's session. So we won't waste any more time. I would love to invite our first speaker today, our keynote speaker, who's Dr. Nina Hall. Dr. Hall is a senior lecturer within the UQ School of Public Health, specialising in the field of environmental health. Dr. Hall's current research has been looking into the implementation and practicalities of the SDGs, so that makes her a perfect fit for our little shindig this afternoon. She's here with us to share a little bit of that research into the SDGs, their relevance in the Australian university context. As stated before, if you have any questions, if you think of any questions as we go, feel free to submit them using the Q&A button down the bottom. Nina, I'd just like to ask you if you when you want the slides changed, just say slide and I'll change it. But over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Lockie, and welcome everyone. So we'll move to the next slide. And thank you to Zane for the welcome to country. And I too want to acknowledge that, well, I'm sitting here on Aboriginal country. I'm near St Lucia as we speak, and I work at Hurston campus most of the time, but both places have been places of learning for thousands of generations. And I really acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and the guidance that they provide to us about the stewardship of our country and going forward. And that's incredibly relevant today because we're talking about sustainability. Next slide. I'm going to give you a very quick tour through the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. And so I thought I'd guide it with 4 questions. So what are they? Why are they relevant? How do we actually turn them from these beautiful motherhood and apple pie statements into something that will actually change the world? And where to now with the SDGs, given the abrupt change that the COVID pandemic has brought on us? Next slide. So to start with, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, have this beautiful opening preamble, and I've highlighted the key words. So it's focused on eradicating poverty, and so much comes back to poverty, and that is the first SDG. But there are 17 SDGs and they all interlink. So, but poverty is such a core function, and resolving poverty or making the world a more equitable place has incredible roll-on effects. And that's actually the theme of the SDGs. It's that they're all interlinked and one feeds onto each other, or it can undermine each other. It's not necessarily a positive direction. And the sustainability, when the term first entered academic dialogue, it was actually ESD, ecologically sustainable development. But it lost the ecological part because there was a recognition as the years went past, over the past 30 years, that yes, it's ecological, but it's also social and it's also economic. And they're often called the 3 pillars of sustainability. And the SDGs reflect that. And the third dimension is that before the SDGs, not yet, thanks, Lucky, almost. The third dimension is that the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, existed from 2000 until 2015 when the SDGs came into place, and they are holding us from 2015 to 2030. And there was a recognition by the United Nations that while the MDGs, all 8 of them, were very powerful and ambitious, there was unfinished business. And so the SDGs are here to finish that business. Next slide. So there are 17 SDGs, and it looks like all my beautiful animations have been lost in the slide pack. So we'll just stay with this slide for a moment. So underneath that is the 17 colourful SDGs, and I often say there's one for every issue, one for every issue that you're concerned about. And they are goals, so 17 goals. And one of them that I look at in particular detail with my research is number 6, which is around clean water and sanitation and hygiene. And underneath that goal level are targets. And the targets are probably the most important part of the SDGs because they are enunciating in detail what these goals are trying to achieve, and really clarifying with detail rather than just, yes, you know, end poverty and provide education for all and clean water, all lovely things, but how do you actually do it? And that's where the targets come in. So you can see target 6.3 within goal number 6 is to reduce untreated wastewater and increase recycle and reuse of water. And then under each target are one or more indicators. And the indicators, for those of you who are really good at quantitative statistics, this is where we actually measure what we've achieved. So we can look at the baseline of where we're starting from in 2015, and we can look at how we're going as we track towards 2030. And there you can see for 6.3, it has 2 different indicators. So that's what really gives basis to the SDGs. They start off big and ambitious, and they end up being very, very detailed. Next slide. Now, one aspect to remember is if you start at SDG 1, which is to end poverty, it does not take you through the SDGs chronologically to number 17. You could probably have guessed that. They are so interlinked, and resolving poverty and providing good health and well-being in SDG 3 and looking at responsible consumption and production in SDG 12 does not get you to number 17, which is around effective partnerships. So it's not a silos approach. And many governments have struggled a little bit with that as they've tried to implement the SDGs, because they've tried to divvy up all 17 goals into different agencies that, you know, Department of Health, you can look after SDG 3 about health and well-being, and Department of Education, you can look after SDG 4 for quality education. That's not how it works, and that's the whole concept of sustainability, which will become very clear as we go through this afternoon's talks, because energy and water treatment and waste management, these are all interlinked together. And if we go to the next slide, this is a piece of work that I did with colleagues here at UQ, trying to map, well, how do all the goals fit into one another? And there are lots of mapping approaches out there, and we use one particular methodology, but you can see that we resolved by doing this mapping exercise, which you can read about more in that discussion paper, that taking action on climate change is actually the most important thing we can do, because it influences everything else that comes below it. And if we actually want to achieve SDG 3, which is good health and well-being, that's the ultimate goal, that's the ultimate outcome, but we can't achieve that if we don't look at climate change and look at effective responses. Next slide. I'm really going very fast through these. What I want you to take away are the 5 messages that I'm going to give you at the end, but you should be picking them up. So, bit of a pointy question. Why are the SDGs relevant? And that was the question I was asked to focus on with this talk. There's 3 dimensions that I think are really powerful. One is it's a global focus. There's 197 countries that have signed up to the SDGs. So that's a common global effort. It's a common language. It's a common set of ambitions. So it's actually a very powerful global level conversation to be having. And what that global dimension affects is buy-in or commitment from national governments, such as the Australian government. So I find with my federal government engagement, with my research and policy submissions and engagement that I do as part of my dissemination of my own research around environmental and social issues, is the SDGs really cause the government to prick up their ears, because they are looking to achieve or attain the SDGs by 2030 as much as possible. So it gets a commitment at a national level. And the third dimension is these are not new issues. Talking about equality for women and talking about quality education and talking about clean air, clean soil, clean water, healthy food chains, reducing emissions. These are conversations that you've grown up with. So they're not new issues, but they are a new frame for old issues. And what's fantastic about that is these are, like I said, unfinished business. We have a lot of distance to go, and the SDGs provide a fresh frame for old issues. So it puts them back on the agenda. So, or those of you who see yourselves in a real advocacy role, this is a leverage point. You take these and you speak in this SDG language, and you have your audience listening in a way that they might not otherwise be. Next slide. And here is another engagement point. So the national governments have to report. It's a voluntary review, but they've committed voluntarily to report against their progress towards the SDGs for 3 times over the next 15 years. And this first review, this is Australia's first review, came out in 2018. And what was quite powerful about this document is they were very honest about where we were at with our attainment towards the SDGs. And so some really specific dimensions, and this is talking about a submission that I made, which is about water and sanitation in remote Indigenous communities that is very far from attaining the SDGs. Next slide. So how do we, third dimension of my four questions, how do we take the SDGs from those lofty goals to on-ground action? So firstly, we need to translate them. We need to understand what they're talking about. Secondly, we need commitment from diverse stakeholders. It's not just government efforts that are going to achieve this, or just corporate efforts, or just civilian efforts. It's all of us actually working together. And we actually need funding too. Nothing happens without sufficient funding and sustainable funding, not just funding this year, but funding for 15 years and beyond that. And in terms of a role for universities, if we go to the next slide, and these slides are available for you, I'm sure, afterwards. I've provided them as a PDF if you'd like to have them. There's this really fantastic document that UQ was involved in publishing, taking an Asia-Pacific focus on SDG implementation. And it really identifies in that quote, the role for universities. We're here not just for education, but also for dissemination of initiatives and building new partnerships, bringing funding together, and really looking both at the SDG framework, but also each of the individual 17 SDGs. Next slide. And just to wrap up, we're in a pandemic. How do the SDGs resolve a pandemic or contribute? Well, there's two ways we can talk about here. One is there are 30 targets that are relevant to health risks, both current and predicted. And in that interlinked way, we're sitting here in a pandemic, which has been caused by, initially by a zoonotic disease that crossed the animal-human boundary and has been obviously transmitted effectively into humans. Looking back along that chain about wildlife and poaching and wet markets and health management, waste management. These are all aspects that have raised transmission, and the SDGs actually have targets that look into how do we cut off those transmission links. But also into the future, the pandemic impacts on low-income countries. We're looking at universal health coverage and stronger health workforce and early warning systems to prevent pandemic spreading. Next slide. So the 5 messages I was hoping to leave you with, or like that I'm hoping you've picked up. One is the SDGs are powerful because they set out an ambition to 2030, and they really provide a lot of detailed guidance on what we could achieve and how we're going to get there. They're not new. They're that fresh frame to leverage old issues that are unresolved. They're applicable to all countries, and that wasn't initially a naivety on the Australian government's part, thinking that they were to address the issues in for the poorest of the poor, which is an unfortunate phrase. It's not. It's for Australia as well as all the countries that we support through our development and aid programs. When you look at the 17 SDGs, you need to look at them and how they interlink together, because it can be very efficient and more effective to look at them as a set. But you can also undermine good efforts if you don't consider them and the relationships between them. They do require a level of translation to understand what they are before you start implementing them, but they can be implemented. And they're absolutely relevant in the challenges that the pandemic of COVID-19 has brought to us. Final slide. So I'm really happy to stay online, of course, for this session, answer questions as they come up in the chat box or live. And I'm happy to send you further information and open the dialogue if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hall. That's I just come in as soon as possible to be the applause for you is the goal. There's a question that's just come in the Q&A box. I thought I'd answer now. An anonymous attendee says, "Hi, Dr. Hall. Do you think COVID-19 will have a positive or negative impact on working towards addressing climate change and the other SDGs? Do you think it will bring around a global mindset change?"
I love this question because it's something I'm thinking about a lot and every day and in the circles that I move in. So this question's come up I'm part of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the UN body that does assessment reports around climate change every 8 years. And before COVID, we were really challenged by the idea of the massive global shift in our behavior and our way of manufacturing and all those different dimensions of life that really need to change to effectively address climate change. And wondering how on earth governments around the world could completely change how they're doing business. And then COVID-19 comes along, and within 2 months, we have flipped how we do business. We have changed how much time we spend flying around the world. We've changed our manufacturing. We've seen the health benefits of lower manufacturing and lower emissions. And we've also seen that the hardest bit of all, which is about human behavior, how quickly human behavior can change. So I think, I don't want to denigrate the impact and the negative impact and the horrible loss of life that COVID-19 has brought. But it's shown us that not only is another world possible, but it's possible incredibly quickly. And so there are parallels and lessons that we can take immediately from COVID-19 into addressing climate change.
Thank you so much for that, Nina. That was wonderful. I guess it is it's a testament. COVID's such a testament to the fact that people can change. I think, and that's the key there. So I will have to keep moving on. If you do have any questions, Dr. Nina Hall can see them in the thing, and she can type answers to you. So I don't know whether that's working or not, but we'll see how it goes. So moving on, for the next speakers, we'll be picking up the pace a bit. We've gathered the sustainability who's who of UQ to give you a comprehensive update on the status of sustainability in the university. Each of the speakers will give a 5-minute crash course of their area of expertise. And as with Dr. Hall, you can submit any questions you have using that button, the Q&A button down the bottom. So without further ado, I'd like to get Danielle up here, who's the project manager of UQ's energy team. Danielle and her team assist with the management of UQ's Warwick Solar Farm initiative. They deliver the Heron Island Research Station microgrid project, and they're the team behind meter battery storage at St. Lucia. So what does it all mean? Danielle, if you could unmute and bring yourself up to the front here.
Thanks for that introduction. I am going to be speaking super quickly today to try and get everything in, but if you want to start with my slides, yep, next one. So before we go into what my team does and some of the cool projects we've been involved with, it's good to understand just how much UQ uses in energy every year. So in 2019, our last full year, we used 140 gigawatt hours across all of our campuses, and that equated to about $20 million spent. So that's really what my team focuses on, is can we get that number down? Because every dollar we don't have to spend on electricity, we can spend on teaching and research. The next slide. It's probably not a surprise to you that about 80% of our electricity usage happens at St. Lucia, and so that means my team spends about 80% of their time trying to get projects up that reduce energy at St. Lucia, a little bit at Gatton, and surprisingly, Pace is also a really big energy user. So next slide. So our office looks at a lot of different things across basically anything that we use energy at UQ. So if you just next slide quickly, it's pretty much divided into two separate areas. So we have our kind of clean energy, but first and foremost, we focus on energy efficiency, because there's no point just trying to build a solar farm to offset our usage if we're just wasting energy. So we really look at how can we get that energy usage down first, and then you obviously don't have to big of a battery or as big of a solar farm to offset that energy usage. So next slide. Generally, when we look at different projects, obviously we're limited staff, limited time, limited budget. We always try and make sure that we're getting the best bang for UQ buck. So we try and do projects that have a 5-year payback or less. So this means we're not going to, upgrade a piece of plant that's $100,000 when it only saves you $1,000 of electricity every year. So we've done a lot of lighting, upgrading LEDs, mechanical plants. So this is all of your air conditioners. It's a series of chilled water loops, and so we try and optimize those as much as possible. And looking at the building tuning itself, so making sure that air cons where they can be turned off in office spaces are on schedules to do that automatically. And we also look at other hot water efficiency and just general efficiency, so things like LED grow lights and labs, fume cupboard controls, and looking at actual building fabrics and making sure we have window tinting and shade and that type of thing. So next slide. This has been a pretty good strategy for us, so apologies for the tiny labels on this graph, but on the left-hand side, 2011, you can see we went through a period of about 4 years where we were actually just using more and more electricity. We then peaked in about beginning of 2015. A little bit of that drop in the next little while is Gatton Solar Farm, so it's a little bit of cheating, but it is due to energy efficiency that we were back to 2011 energy levels by 2016. And as you keep going to the right, so 2018, 2019, we start leveling off, because at the end of the day, UQ still needs electricity to carry on its business. You guys want lights and computers working, and libraries are still 24/7 air conditioning. It doesn't matter how many students are in them. So we've kind of leveled off at this 8% below 2011 levels, and we're pretty happy with that. We've got all the low hanging fruit. So next slide. So that leaves us with, well, how the electricity we have to use, what can we do to make it cleaner and greener? So UQ was a pretty early adopter of solar PV. In 2010, we did our first installation at Heron Island. You can see there's another big jump in 2015 where you obviously get the Gatton Solar Farm. And we've just continued to kind of do rooftops here and there. But if you do the next slide, obviously the big jump this year is the 78 megawatt Warwick Solar Farm, which we're super excited about and takes up a lot of my team's time at the moment. So if you go next. This is a rare photo of Warwick Green, because unfortunately the area is in drought, but you can see it's a really big solar farm. We have plenty, it's oversized because the Warwick Solar Farm will do about 160 gigawatt hours. 160 gigawatt hours per year, and we only use that 140. So it's oversized, allowing us to grow, but also for the panels to degrade over the next 25 years. Next slide. So now that UQ is both a large generator with the Warwick Solar Farm and a large consumer, we have what's called our Gensumer strategy. So this is looking towards the future. Next slide. So UQ at the beginning of the year started purchasing our electricity from the spot market, so we don't have an off-peak and on-peak electricity tariff. Our price of electricity actually changes every 5 minutes. And while that's risky, it also gives us an opportunity to respond to the spot market and increase or decrease our electricity depending on what that price is. So if you go to the next slide, you can see this is an average day for what the Warwick Solar Farm would produce if there was no clouds. And you can see that it's much, much oversized, because over the course of the year, we expect that portion in the yellow to offset the portion in the gray. So if you click next, where our team is going to be focusing, it's not just about how much electricity we can save, it's when we can save it, because that spot price has a bit of a peak in the morning. where prices are higher because solar is not coming on, and next. And then there's another peak when solar is coming off, the price spikes again as people are coming home and still using electricity. So our team is looking at how can we save money and save electricity during these areas. Next. So we're doing that. Hopefully everyone's seen our beautiful big Tesla battery outside of the AEB. It's 1 megawatt to megawatt hours. Next. And if you do a quick Google for UQ Tesla battery dashboard, we have a live dashboard where you can see what the battery's up to. And you can also download a whole bunch of data if you need it for any of your projects. Next. But we're not just focusing on chemical batteries, we're also doing some thermal batteries. So that's a 3.4 megaliter chilled water tank out at Gatton. Basically lets us charge up with chilled water during the day, turn it off during the night, and run a large portion of Gatton just from that tank. Okay, that's me. Sorry, I went a bit over. I tried to get through too much.
No, that's all right. Yeah, let's, we're probably going to have to skip straight over the Q&A, but if I'm not mistaken, I think there's an online tour of the Warwick solar grid. When's that? Is that tomorrow?
Yeah, it is online, and it's a good one. My boss Andrew had a lot of fun filming it for you guys, so hopefully you can review it and feel like you're there.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much, Danielle. I'm going to. There was so much info there. It's pretty unfair, really. We only give people 5 minutes to run through like years of work and everything, the things they do day in, day out. But next, we're going to hear from the Environment Sustainability Officer, Christine. Christine is responsible for the design and implementation of the recycling and reuse programs for the Sustainability Office. Through this and her monitoring of the effectiveness of those waste programs, she's an absolute sustainability VIP. Her role makes her the authority on the need for waste reduction and recycling. Christine, take it away.
Thanks, Lachie. God, that's big words to fulfill. Okay, if you can just move the slide. All right, so I do a lot of work with Sophie around waste here at UQ. The reason we're focusing on waste, and we have been for many years, is one of the reasons is responding to the growing community expectation. Students, would have been a couple of years ago, did a petition to have single-use plastics reduced here on the St Lucia campus. One particular student set up the petition. They got over 3,200 or so signatures. So we know it's something that students and staff really care about. It's a waste. It's obviously resources that are just going, a lot of them going into landfills, so we want to reduce that. Operating costs, not only is it cost money buying in the waste, but also in the disposing of the waste. And Queensland recently, or last year, got the waste levy, so we're now paying $75 a tonne for any waste that goes to landfill. That's on top of the normal waste disposal costs that we pay our waste contractor. So it makes sense to reduce waste, increase recycling, and also to demonstrate leadership. So we signed up to the STARS program, which is the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System. And this is a reporting system where we report our sustainability performance. And we've just signed up to it this year, and we start reporting this year. And a few of those different elements that we're reporting on are waste related. And you can see just there in the slideshow, there's food and beverage purchasing, waste minimisation and diversion, construction and demolition waste, and hazardous waste management. Thanks, Lachie. So this just gives you a bit of an idea of how waste is tracking here at UQ. So this was St Lucia. Every year, well, really every second year, we're meant to do a waste audit. This year, we get our waste contractor to dig through about 100 bins and give us the data on what's in each bin. And we're looking at general waste and commingled. So this was 2018, and this is basically just an average of when we put all those 100 bins data together, this is what it looks like. So you can see the general waste. The yellow is actually recyclable. The green is organic, and I can see there tissues and towels. That's all organic too. That can go into the organic stream. And then the red is what can't go into the organic stream and has to go to landfill. So you can see there that just by sorting our rubbish better, we could reduce our landfill waste by about 2/3. Then if you look over in the commingled recycling, again, the yellow is what should be in there, red is landfill, and then the green is organics. So you can see people getting very confused with the coffee cups in particular, soft plastic, and also putting tissues and towels in there. So it really gives us good data about why people are doing what they're doing as far as their behaviours around waste. Okay, next slide. So what is our strategy to reduce waste and reduce landfill? I've put reduce waste down the bottom there. That should really be up the top because that's our primary focus. We want to reduce waste as much as we can, and then with what's left over, then we want to see that diverted away from landfill. So reducing waste, it's all about bringing your own Keep Cat or using green caffeine. We also had hoped to start a reusable container scheme similar to green caffeine but for takeaway food containers. And that was going to start this year, but things have, that's been put on hold now that BYO isn't the done thing. UQ Unwrapped is all about reducing single-use plastics, working with our retailers on campus, also with the people organising events and markets, and also the residential halls trying to reduce single-use plastics, go for reusable, and where reusable isn't feasible, then look at compostable. Warped is a system we have. It's for staff only, unfortunately, but it's about reuse. So any of the office equipment, lab gear, office consumables, it's about getting staff to upload that onto the system so these things can be reused. And I'm currently working on the proposal for a repair cafe here on campus. Improving recycling is the big one because you could see from that graph before that people aren't recycling, getting the recycling right, so we can reduce our landfill quite substantially if people were to know what to recycle. So that's part of that area was removing under desk bins. We did that last year. We removed all the under desk bins for staff and we saw a tripling of our recycling rates from that. We introduced the container refund scheme, and then of course the big thing here is education and engagement. It's looking at the signage. We put new signage up at FIDS, which was quite successful, but it's just really around engaging and educating. And then organics diversion. This is pre-consumer, post-consumer, so these are in the food outlets. It's educating the people working in these outlets to separate out the organic waste that they're working with, and then again out post-consumer out in the food courts. Organic collection within office areas, we're looking at introducing, we're going to start a trial soon, but the paper towels, and there is so many paper towels because we audited some of the bins in Gatton last week, and I'd say about half all general waste is paper towels now, with people washing their hands more. So that can go in the organic stream. So we're going to start looking at putting organics bins within the bathroom so that captures all the paper towels so they're not going to landfill. And the other area we look at is UQ Unwrapped, so continuing to work with the different retailers to move to compostable, reusable where feasible, otherwise compostable. And I think that's it, Lockie.
Sorry, it's this guy who's doing the slides useless. So Christine, thank you so much. I think Shaniza put a question in the Q&A, but I think it may be better. She was just asking about why there's no composting at UQ, but you may be better to answer that, type the answer. She also brought up the possibility of information sessions on how to use the correct bin, because types of bins in Australia are different from other countries. Shaniza, that may be a really good initiative to bring up in the second session of today's event, in the discussion session where we can work on some ideas. But Christine, thank you so much for talking to us about that. And I will again move on quickly. I know we've been moving at a breakneck pace because there's so much happening and you've only got so much time. Now, Suzanne wanted me to make a point as well that the Warwick Solar Tour is actually online. It was this morning because of my inability to read dates and times. I thought it was tomorrow. But if you head to the Sustainability Office Facebook, I was just on there before and I could, I was obviously listening to Christine as well, but was just checking. So it's on there now. Anyway, our next Sustainability VIP, one of the biggest personalities in UQ Sustainability, Helena is the Program Manager for the Environment and Sustainability in PNF. So she's got 30 years of experience in the industry. She's in the best spot to ensure UQ across all its sites avoids environmental harm and ensures environmental best practice. So Helena, she manages risk, she monitors our environmental licenses and permits, and she regularly reports to Queensland environmental regulators. She's a leader of the team and she's here now. So Helena, take it away, please.
Hi, thank you, Lachlan. Hi, everyone. Thank you, the team, Christine so far, and the others to follow. Everyone's doing a fantastic job in your theme areas. So what I'm going to focus on is water and compliance. I've just prepared for myself a couple of slides here this morning. So UQ is a large consumer of water. It's no surprise. Similar sort of dimensions in terms of proportions to energy. For example, in 2019, St. Lucia, or the whole of UQ sites, in terms of drinking water or potable water, our consumption was 784 megalitres. That's about just a little over 300 standard Olympic-sized pools. St. Lucia alone was about 484 megalitres. Now, potable water is a precious resource, and we are actively looking at ways to reduce that level of clean drinking water consumption. We also at St. Lucia receive about 7 megalitres a week of clean, really clean recycled water. And we know that about 30% of our current drinking water use is used in chilled water towers for air conditioning. So we're actively looking at connecting those two, making some of that recycled water available into the chilled water plants and reducing our consumption of drinking water. And in a changing climate, and back to what Dr. Hall was saying with SDG 6.3, that is a really interconnected initiative addressing climate adaptation and water, and achieving really high proportions of recycled water reuse. We also, just a couple of other points, at Gatton, we manage our own sewage treatment plant and produce recycled water from that process. All of that recycled water is used on the paddocks to grow lucerne, primarily lucerne, which is then baled and is used for feed for our teaching herds. And we also use quite a bit of groundwater at Gatton as well. Just moving on to, so yeah, that water and the other use of the recycled water at St. Lucia is to irrigate our ovals and grounds. So all of our ovals, the area of the grounds around the hockey fields, historically the Great Court was also irrigated, but we're now looking to connect that recycled water to the Great Court as well. And that keeps our grounds looking beautiful, and they become a pleasant place to be. Just moving on to then compliance and risk. I quickly mentioned our Gatton sewage treatment plant. UQ Sustainability Office looks after 2 environmental authorities under the Environmental Protection Act and its subordinate legislation. We also look after multiple permits for trade waste, for recycled water, and all of these require a level of monitoring, a level of tracking, and liaison with the regulators to ensure that we are meeting our conditions to discharge our obligations and duties under those legislations, and to notify if there is an incident. We also manage pests, plants and animals, and that is under the Biosecurity Act. We're responsible to ensure we meet those conditions, and also involved in training staff what are their responsibilities and obligations under the legislation. To look up some of that work, go to our sustainability website under environmental risk, and we also manage an environmental management system for those risks. More recently, governance and risk have developed an enterprise risk management framework, and we also work to that as the framework. So look, in a nutshell, that was really quick on water and compliance. I will add these slides to the pack so that they're available as the download later on for all the participants. Thank you, Lachlan, and everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Elena. That's a huge role. Something that I'm curious about is what do you find is the biggest challenge? You know, seeing the whole of the environment and sustainability department, I guess, or the team. What's the biggest challenge that you can identify?
I think it's connecting it all and seeing it all as wicked problems to solve, and really involving many disciplines to solve, you know, our current issues. So it's very like Dr. Hall was saying, we're in a stage in history where we no longer can silo anything. There really has to be connections and crossovers between the disciplines, so that we can find the right solutions. And that's a challenge, because as individuals with a background in a particular area, we've got to challenge ourselves and expand our view and create those connections across the disciplines as well.
I noticed that as well when Dr. Hall was talking, and she had a slide where all of the different SDGs were informing each other. Obviously, climate action was there as one of the big ones that, you know, affected everything. The other one was partnerships that affected everything. So it's, you know, all about those teams, multidisciplinary teams. Anyway, Helena, thank you so much for giving us that absolute, you know, crash course in all things water compliance, risk. Next, we've got Carmel, who is an Environment and Sustainability Program Officer within the Sustainability Office team. Carmel's across all things environmental reporting and review, but today she's claiming her crown as the Queen of Biodiversity. So, Carmel, let's get into it, I reckon. Take it away.
Thank you, Lachlan, and good afternoon, everyone. So today I'll be talking to you guys about biodiversity at UQ, and I'll try my best to answer a few questions. What flora and fauna is there on UQ campuses? How is UQ protecting these? What can UQ staff and students do to help these efforts? And what are the current plans and future goals for UQ's biodiversity initiatives? We'll start with what flora and fauna is on UQ campuses. Obviously, the UQ campuses and sites are home to a vast array of flora and fauna. We've got the St. Lucia campus, the Indooroopilly Mine, Pinjarra Hills, Long Pocket, Gatton, next to major, the Brisbane River, and the creeks. So there's Lockyer Creek for Gatton and Whitten Creek for the Indooroopilly Mine. So we've got a whole range of native species, non-native species, as well as invasive and pest species on campuses and sites. For example, you see a whole range of native bird life at St. Lucia. We've got some aquatic species in the lake. We've got reptiles running around, as well as mammals, some nocturnal possums and bats. We've actually got over 100 different species spotted around the UQ St. Lucia lakes alone. We do have that list on the sustainability website if you want to have a look. We also have over 25 flora and fauna markers around the lakes if you want to do the sustainability walk and have a read for yourself. All that information is also on the sustainability website. We also have a nuisance species. So we've got the ibis that can be a bit cheeky and steal your lunch at dining areas. Since COVID has closed up these dining areas, we haven't had any complaints so far. So we'll see how it all goes in the next few months. Other species that become a nuisance can be the brush turkeys or the possums. We also have feral species such as cats, foxes, cane toads, pest fish. We've got deer at Kinjari Hills and hares out at Gatton. We used to have non-native species. The domestic ducks and the guinea fowl used to wander around the lakes. They unfortunately have gone missing, and we believe that a predator has taken them. So it's the circle of life, I guess. And the flora on campus is mostly native. We do have 2 bush tucker gardens as well, down the path from GCI to the lakes. There's one, and there's one also adjacent the Hartley Tickle building, which have purely indigenous food plants in them. And we do have non-native species in our gardens that aren't invasive. So, for example, the iconic jacaranda tree is actually a native to subtropical and tropical regions of Latin America and the Caribbean. As well as we've got the community garden, which grows herbs and vegetables. And then we have some weed species on our campuses, which we do our best to control and remove as part of our general biosecurity obligation under the Biosecurity Act. So how is UQ protecting these? The PNF grounds manage the sites quite well. They try their best to protect natural environments by restoring and revegetating areas, protecting old trees, keeping leaf litter and dead branches and trees for habitat for wildlife. And they try their best to connect the vegetation to support wildlife. They minimise their use of chemicals and try to opt for natural biocontrol where possible. Sorry about that. Sorry, I've gone a bit over. So yeah, the grounds guys manage the grounds quite well. They used to have a wildlife carer on their team, but we encourage anyone who finds sick or injured wildlife to call PF Assist during business hours or the RSPCA outside of business hours. We also have a range of contacts such as the pelican and seabird rescue, the bat conservation and rescue, or reptile rehabilitation contacts on the sustainability website, as well as instructions on how to look after injured wildlife if you do come across it. We do have a range of sustainability activities such as planting events that have helped with protecting our sort of natural areas. And we have had some partnerships in the past. So for the School of Biological Sciences, we've had nest boxes installed at St Lucia, Gatton, Long Pocket and Pinjarra Hills. We're a Land for Wildlife conservation partner, so we've partnered with them as well as Conservation Volunteers Australia to plant Richmond birdwing butterfly vines to attract the sort of vulnerable butterfly with the same name. And we've done a riverbank restoration project in partnership with the Society of Conservation Biology, as well as a Melaleuca urbiana planting out at Gatton, which Melaleuca urbiana is an endangered species. So we partnered with SEQ catchments to link two existing patches together to create a big, more robust planting. Yeah, so we've done planting projects, nest boxes, any bees that we've come across, we'll relocate or rehome. Like we've managed nuisance species, and we've had an ibis management program in place for over 10 years. And any other species that become a nuisance, such as possums that come into buildings, or pigeons, brush turkeys, that sort of thing, we'll try our best to relocate them. And in terms of weed management, we do have weed management plans on campus. Sorry, I've taken up so much time, so I'll have to wrap up. What can staff and students do? Obviously, don't feed the wildlife on campus. Put your rubbish in the bin. Be mindful of what goes down the sink and drains. Call PF Assist if you find injured wildlife. Volunteer at planting and cleanup events. Contact us for partnerships and project opportunities. Report any issues or concerns regarding wildlife, and provide any feedback and suggestions. So we'll continue to manage biodiversity activities and improve and review them continuously, and update biodiversity documentation under the EMS. So yeah, sorry about going over time, but thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Carmel. There's obviously so much going on biodiversity-wise, so it's hard to keep the time frame. But I'm going to have to keep going because our next speaker is actually hurrying me up in the chat and sending messages. So our next speaker is actually one of the key figures behind today's event and the Green Ambassador program as a whole. Emily is a Sustainability Office Green Programs Assistant, and as such, she's the woman with the plan behind a whole variety of student and staff engagement programs, including Green Office, Green Labs, Green Student Fund, with everything else. And in her spare time, she studies a Bachelor of Environmental Science. Emily, take it away.
Thanks so much, Lachie. Yeah, so my name's Emily Conn and I work in the Sustainability Office as the Green Programs Assistant. So my job is all about engaging students and staff to get more involved in sustainability. Engaging people in sustainability is a big challenge, not just at UQ, but everywhere, right? So suggesting eco-friendly changes to someone, especially when it's not compulsory, can sometimes be met with like a lack of interest or even objection. I think this is usually because people don't know really how to be more sustainable, or because any sort of change is really personally inconvenient. And this is why sustainability engagement is incredibly important. So to create any sort of change, you need the support of the people it would be affecting. At UQ, this means engaging diverse groups in the student and staff cohorts to implement initiatives on campus. So many engagement theories state that people will be engaged if they find something meaningful, important, and have an interest in it. So for sustainability, most people already find it important. So the engagement component is all about creating empowerment, interest, and making it as easy being the operative word, as possible to be a part of. So how is UQ achieving this? Please change the slide, Lachlan. So the Sustainability Office teams are always trying to engage students and staff. We urge staff, for instance, to report water leaks or inefficient energy use. We invest in signage to help people choose the correct bins. We've even gotten UQ volunteers to raise awareness about campus biodiversity. These initiatives are easy to follow, and we highlight how being involved in them, you can make a difference, essentially. UQ also has specific student and staff engagement programs. So you might have heard of these before, the Green Office and Green Labs programs for staff. And so they support a wide network of staff to implement changes in their workplace and get co-workers on board. So first up, we frame topics of water, energy waste, and purchasing practices as important in the workplace, not just from a sustainability point of view, but also as a cost point of view. So both of these point of views get staff interest, and from there we offer easy initiatives, seminars, competitions, and training for staff to get involved in. We have some other engagement programs as well. So Gatton Residential College competes yearly in Green the Team. So it's an initiative that awards colleges for reducing their energy and water consumption. The Student Green Fund, which, like you mentioned before, it helps students get initiatives off the ground on campus. So if you have an initiative you'd like to implement but need funds to get started, applications are open from July to September, which is now. Please apply if you have an idea. Next slide, please. And the program that I'm a big fan of is the Green Ambassador Program. So I officially launched this year, and Lockie already gave a shining overview of it. But to recap, the Green Ambassador Program is run by students for students. So the main goals of the program are to create a place where both students and staff can collaborate on initiatives, learn about the UN's SDGs, and just generally make UQ a more sustainable place. The important thing is that there is no barriers to access. So if you're interested in sustainability, you're already part of the program. It is then up to you how much you want to get involved. And by joining the Facebook group, which is linked to our Sustainability Office Facebook page, you can keep up to date with everything going on in the program. So through our events and social media, the Green Office program, the Green Ambassador Program offers a range of topics to get involved in. So no matter what you're interested in sustainability, there's something for you. And we aim to create meaningful interactions within UQ. Next slide, please. This next slide is just the other goals of the Green Ambassador Program. So I'll make my slides available later on if you want to have a look. And last slide, change please. So, you know, Green Office, Green Labs, Green Ambassador Program, Green the Team, Student Green Fund, so many things implemented by the Sustainability Office, but these aren't even all the ways that you can get involved with in sustainability at UQ. So there's student-staff partnerships, the UQ Community Garden, UQ Unwrapped, and the Ambassador Program were all student-staff partnerships to begin with, so sky's the limit. There are many sustainable clubs and societies you can join as students. So these include UQ GEMS, Oxfam, Marine Society, Community Garden Club, the UQ Environment Collective, which is Lockie. They oversee all of these clubs. So contact them if you want more guidance of which club you'd like to join. UQ Unwrapped was mentioned before, and Christine already gave some info about that. You can attend events in Sustainability Week, stay in contact with people that are organizing the events, see what else is coming up during the year. You're already doing that, so good on you guys. A big thing is joining UQ volunteers. So if we need student volunteers, we'll usually go to them. So if you join up with them, then you might get a chance to work with us. And everything else is in the slides, so you can have a bit of a look because I know we're strapped on time. And as always, if you have any ideas on how to improve sustainability at UQ, we'd love to hear from you. So contact us via social media, email the sustainability email, and you can also discuss all of your ideas in the second part of the forum. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening.
Talk about breakneck pace. Thing about Em's role is, you know, she only had time to just basically, you know, say the things that she's involved with. Didn't have time, you know, 5 minutes, you read a list really, but that was so good. So we're all full, we're all exploding. We have one more speaker for today, last but certainly not least, Suzanne. Suzanne, who works within the Sustainability Office as well, and she's a humble powerhouse of the team. She focuses on areas of engagement, strategy, and the SDGs. There they are again. She takes responsibility for the measurement and benchmarking of UQ sustainability performance. So I'm sure you can tell how she'll fit into today's puzzle. Suzanne, take it away.
Thanks, Lachlan, for that introduction. I just want to check first that everyone can hear me okay and that there's not too much background noise in the office. All good? Okay. If it becomes a problem, let me know and I will run around the corner into the meeting room that Christine's sitting in so that you can hear me a bit better. Okay, so firstly, thanks to the executive from the Green Ambassadors Program for putting today together and for all the work that's gone on behind the scenes. Emily's done heaps and Lachlan especially, but the whole team has done heaps to get us all here today, which is really, really good. So the UQ Sustainability Strategy, it's been developed over the past year or so and is still in development, and it is a sustainability strategy for all of UQ. And it's for the time period of 2020 through to 2030. And that time frame is so that it lines up with the United Nations SDGs, which is for 2030. So we're working towards that time frame. So it's a decade. It might seem like a long way out, but we sort of thought, where were we at 10 years ago? And so much has changed in that period of time. So we're aiming high for lots of change in the next decade. The development of the strategy started with students. So we put a individual email invitation out to every staff and every student member last year and invited everyone along to participate in workshops. There were 3 workshops that were run and we had a fantastic research higher degree student, Jess, who ran the workshops for us. So we were working to the model of students for students to engage people. And out of those workshops, we also did online surveys too. So with the workshops, we had heaps of people turn up face to face, but we also wanted to make it easy for people who, one, might not be in Brisbane, might be at a remote site, might be overseas, or would prefer to contribute online rather than face to face. So we ran some surveys online. We opened it up during Sustainability Week last year. And out of that, we had nearly 2,000 ideas contributed and analysed all of those, and that came streamlined down to be 500 odd unique ideas because there was some overlapping contributions. Those 500 ideas became the basis of the document, and that's what the sustainability strategy is built on. It was written out of those 500 ideas, and then it's gone through a process of consultation and getting input from management at UQ, and it's now at the point where it's with the executive at the Deputy Vice Chancellor level and the Vice Chancellor's committee level, with the intention of it being endorsed and going to Senate hopefully by the end of this year, and then it will be the formal document and it can be out there for everyone to see. Otherwise I'll be sharing a copy of it with you now. So that's the strategy document. I'm going to touch on a little bit of the STARS process too that Christine mentioned a little bit earlier on. So the strategy document is in 4 pillars, and the 4 areas are academics, which is like teaching and learning and research. The second area is engagement, so how UQ engages with the external community and also how we engage our own community. Operations, which is like infrastructure, so the things people often think of like water, transport, energy, biodiversity and so on, food on campus. And the last section is administration and planning, which includes leadership committees, how we engage people on committees to have input into the leadership, equity, wellbeing, those sorts of things. So those 4 pillars represent around about 80 different areas, and we are in the process of measuring our performance in those 80 different areas, and that's using the STARS tool, which is Sustainability Tracking, Assessment and Rating System. So you can just Google that and it will come up. There's over 1,000 universities globally using that system to measure their sustainability performance. So the idea is that we have our sustainability strategy, we have our performance that we're measuring, and then we look at how are we going basically, and how much of a gap is between where we're at and where we want to be at, and then prioritising which areas we're going to focus on first and celebrating the areas that we're already doing really well in. So we can do that against our own strategy, but we can also do that against the other tertiary institutions, so against universities globally, which gives us a very detailed view on how we are going. The other thing I was going to mention, so I'm trying to go super fast, hopefully not too fast for everyone, is the Sustainable Development Goals. The strategy has been mapped against all the SDGs so that we can see how we're going on each of the 17 SDGs. But like Dr. Hall mentioned earlier, we can't look at one in isolation. They're all so interlinked. And our sustainability performance measurement is also mapped against the SDGs too. So we've got, we're getting a pretty good handle on that. The last thing I wanted to mention was that UQ is part of a pilot in the Australasian area for use of the STARS system. And we are one of the first pairs of universities that's, we've done our report, we're in peer review and we're finalising it. So we're leading in that space in this area, which is pretty exciting to have been part of that pilot program. Universities right around Australia and in New Zealand. So hopefully I've crammed that into 5 minutes. I'll be online for a little while to answer any questions. Over to you, Lachie.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I look forward to seeing the shiny document when it inevitably gets past Senate.
Me too.
And it's cool to hear that we're at the forefront there. You know, we're at the the cracking edge, as they say. They don't say that, but I'm saying it right now. Anyway, thank you, Suzanne. I'd like to give one final huge thanks to all of the speakers that we went through today. Everyone's head is probably, absolutely bulging with the amount of information. As everyone said, there's emails available on those slides, and we'll get those out in the event. Now, so the next section, I should say, of this is going to be a discussion section. So Emily's just put in the chat there, you'll see that there's a second link there. So what we're going to do is, those of you who can, we'll migrate over to that other Zoom, which is going to be not a webinar format. So if everyone can copy and paste that, I'll give everyone a little bit of time to exit out of here and then get into that next one. So again, thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to everyone who came and listened through the time. As we've made, there's a few questions that have been answered there in the chat. This will be exported onto the YouTube channel, and we'll have a full post up afterwards, so you can send it to all your friends. Hopefully they've got all my. Oh, sorry. Emily said that she's going to have to end this one before starting the other. So just wait a minute or two there. All right. Make sure everyone's got that copied. We'll put that link. I'll post it into the Facebook page as well. And so, all right, I'll turn myself off then. And thank you so much, everybody.